to the Quiet Warrior Show, where we help top leaders find their pathway to incredible success and a lifetime of happiness. Here is your host, Tom Dutta, the Quiet Warrior.
Well, welcome to the Quiet Warrior Show. My name is Tom Dutta. I am the Quiet Warrior. I'm excited to have on the show today Mr. Don Rheem. Don, welcome to the show.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
It's a pleasure to have you on, Don. I've been waiting to do this, and we were just having fun offline talking about how we tried to connect. You were down in Mexico. You're back now. So I think I'm getting you in just outside of Washington. Is that where you're at now?
Yes, I am. Just in Northern Virginia, just outside of Washington, D.C.
All right. Beautiful part of the United States. Well, Don, that's the magic of technology. I'm up here on the west coast of Canada and Vancouver. This is an international audience, and so we're pleasure to have you on. Well, let's just turn it to you, Don. This is about you. Tell us about yourself.
Well, I am former journalist and White House correspondent that has gotten really excited about the science around neuroscience and how it relates to the workplace and creating great workplace cultures. And I've gotten just so passionate about using science to create workplaces where people actually look forward to coming to work. And that's just about all I focus on right now.
Well, that's great, Don. And I have your bio in front of me, and I said to you that the people coming on the show, they're authentic leaders. You are one of those. And I want to build you up, though, so the audience knows more about your background. You're the CEO of E3 Solutions, and as you said, you provide workplace metrics or you use science really to build high-performance cultures. I'm fascinated by that, Don, particularly because of my background in business. But I want to tell everybody that there's a lot more to Don Rheem. I mean, you're a former science advisor to both Congress and the Secretary of Health and Human Services in the United States. You've written a book, Thrive by Design, and we might get into that. I know you've done a TED Talk, which is awesome. Can Work Save Our Relationships? Wow, what a title. You're not only an author, but you're a thought leader, and you do a lot of things to help businesses and develop people. I noticed, Don, that your background is extensive, 30 years of experience. I mean, one of the things that stands out is the work you've done in your government. You've mentored or coached 30 U.S. senators and hundreds of CEOs, senior executives, in this area of performance with this science that you talked about. And of course, what stands out as a Canadian is when anybody says I'm a former White House correspondent, my radar goes up and goes, wow, there's probably a lot more wisdom and learning we can get out of a guy like you because of that experience. What I love, the last part of your bio, Don, is the family man thing. I mean, you're a lifelong entrepreneur. Your grandfather was president of Standard Oil. Your great-grandfather, your grandfather was a founder of Rheem Manufacturing. So when we hear Don Rheem, everybody, we're not only hearing a man who's a teacher, but a man who's been in the trenches in business. So, hey, Don, that's just great to have your background on the show. So, we talk about the hero's journey. That's going back to where it all started. Success isn't just about all the great things, but sometimes it's about the ups and downs along the way. Why don't you start and take us back, get us into your story, and tell us how you arrived at where you are today, and then we'll get more into that.
Sure. So as you mentioned, I was a journalist, a White House correspondent. I was a bureau chief in Washington. And when I left that line of work, I started consulting with companies on crisis communication and messaging and how to communicate to engage with their target audiences. But what I realized is I could give these organizations and senior leaders better communication skills, but if the content of what they were communicating was off the mark, was toxic, wasn't helpful to audiences, wasn't true, wasn't honest, that I was just helping them say negative things more effectively. So I decided to shift away from the communication skills and dive deeper into what creates a great culture. And my background is in the sciences, and so I'm just fascinated by the recent research over the last 8 years of neuroscience and our understanding of the brain. We've learned more about the brain in the last 8 years than we have in the previous 1,000. But we've learned not only where things happen in the brain, which was some of the initial excitement, but now we know why things happen in the brain. That is, we know what drives human behavior, literally down to the cellular level. And what is so fascinating about this to me is we all share these same motivators of behavior. So this is an issue that cuts across the traditional barriers of ethnicity, of gender, of education, of culture. Not only do we share 99.9% of our DNA with each other, but we share common origins of behavior. And when senior leaders can understand this hardwired neural reality in the brain, if they can start to align their workplace culture around that, human beings thrive. And that's why I titled the book Thrive by Design. We literally now know the conditions. When you create these conditions, people in those conditions start to outperform, and they start to operate it closer to their full capacity. So this is you could call it a story about neuroscience. You could call it a story about employee engagement. You could talk about it through the lens of creating great cultures. But this is what we do at E3 Solutions. We not only we measure it, we measure before we start, and then we measure every year thereafter. And we see these remarkable shifts in engagement. And it's not uncommon just in the first year of applying some of these neurological truths that employee engagement goes up around 30%. It's just remarkable when you do things that the brain is hungry for.
Well, that's amazing, Don. I mean, you've got my heart here. I mean, my mind is going in so many different directions. As a CEO myself, when I was early in my career, what I really didn't get until I started understanding some of what you're talking about is the why behind the behavior. And I want to just throw out there that given your experience in the government in the United States, I mean, we have a lot of media up here on the American government. We see a lot of dysfunction from the leadership, what's going on, and it's just sound bites. But take me back and help me understand when you come across dysfunction in a company, or in this case, you were coaching and mentoring in government. When you come across people who are maybe not understanding the why behind their behavior, perhaps they're toxic leaders, tell me how, when you go into an organization, how do you sort of unravel all that?
Sure. Well, it turns out that about 70% of the variance in how employees perform during the day is directly attributable to their immediate manager or supervisor. So 70% of the wobble in employee engagement is about managers. So we focus on managers in our work. And so when we measure engagement in a company, we do it by manager. And we can tell for every manager in the company how engaged their team is. And that helps us immediately use data to identify the managers who are struggling as leaders. They're often technically competent. They're often even well thought of and even charismatic. But as leaders, they're just underperforming. And then we use the data from the 28 questions in our survey to determine what exactly is the fine-tuning that this manager needs. But beyond that fine-tuning for the individual, we do, again, know these baseline conditions that human beings need to thrive. And I'll give you just two of them. So to back up a little bit, not get too science focused, but the part of the brain that has control precedence is called the limbic system, LAMBIC. It includes organs like the amygdala, the hypothalamus, the hippocampus. It's the heart and soul of both emotional processing, but also fight, flight, or freeze. So this limbic system, it's on constant vigilance for potential threat. And in fact, it overestimates threat. It's what researchers call it favors false positives. But it turns out that the two conditions that seem to trump everything else for what we would call a safe leader, and I don't mean safe from the roof falling in, but I'm talking about emotional safety for the limbic system, is consistency and predictability. It turns out that the part of the brain that is constantly vigilant for threat wants to know what's next. That's very important to know what's next. And that takes consistency and predictability on a part of a leader. And that's just not one of the strengths of a majority of today's leaders. They're mercurial in how they perform and how they give recognition and how they dole out punishment. We're stuck in an old model, Tom. And this was a model that was developed certainly before the Industrial Revolution, but as a management technique in an era of labor abundance, which we were in until about 3 years ago. You could treat employees any way you wanted, and they would still show up because they needed to keep their job. But we're now in an era of labor scarcity, and it's not going to go away soon. And in this kind of environment, managers literally have to create the conditions where employees look forward to coming to work, and they're just not doing that well.
Yeah, that's a fascinating, Don. You had me think about the millennial generation. I mean, I'm thinking about my daughter now who's just finishing university. My two stepsons are in their 30s. I mean, this generation works very differently. I read a report from Gallup, some good research, that millennials want coaches and mentors, not bosses. And I want you to just talk a little bit about that, Don, using what you've learned in your science. How do you coach, and how do you teach leaders to coach and mentor the generations that are coming up that are going to run the world?
Well, the coaching and mentoring are two great words to describe models that are more effective than the old top-down hierarchical punitive approach. You know, we've gone from an era where leaders thought employees were privileged to work for them, and now we're actually privileged to have them, and we're privileged if they stay. And it takes a different kind of a mindset. And millennials and Gen Z, so millennials are like 34 and younger, Gen Z is considered 22 and younger. These generations are looking for different characteristics of leaders. They do care about the quality of the leadership. And here's the quick, short way I think we can think about this and what has shifted. When we think about who raised us, people our age, our parents or grandparents, they lived through, it was either one or the other, parents or grandparents lived through extended years of deprivation. It was either a world war or a depression. And when you live through extended years of deprivation, the framing, the way you view work was as a survival issue, because if you had a job in that era, you had food on the table and a roof over your head. If you didn't, you were in a soup line in a tent camp. So they framed work as survival. And you remember the first time you went in and told your parents, oh, I have this horrible manager, they did this, that, and the other. What did they tell you?
Yeah.
For most, it was suck it up, get back in there. You're lucky to have a job. And it turns out they were true.
I was going to say, my dad would say, because he was a commanding officer in the military, and he passed away a year ago, by the way. My dad would say exactly that. He'd say, he'd tell me to tough it up. So that's why I'm smiling.
Yeah. And so when we look at millennials and Gen Z, they have not experienced that same extended years of deprivation. I don't want to discount the challenge of the recession, and I don't want to discount the challenge of student loans, but it's still different. The point is, they frame work differently than we did and the people that raised us did. And by the way, I'm in my 60s. So it's a different world, and they're looking for different things from their leaders. And this is why we have such an opportunity at E3 Solutions. Normally, when science delivers really important breakthroughs and understandings, real paradigm shifts, we change. We learn new things about health. We learn new things about food and chemicals or fat or cholesterol or whatever it is, carbohydrates. We change and we shift according to the science. But science has shown us a better way to lead people, but organizations are just very, very slow to accept it and make a shift. And most organizations, we estimate, are about 20 years behind what science tells us are the most effective ways to lead people.
Yeah, that's fascinating, Don. I was reading before your bio a couple points, and one of them was about the TED Talk you did. I want you to talk about this for a minute, if you can, as well. It says, "Can work save our relationships?" I'll turn it back to you in a minute, but I'm thinking about, what does that mean? And for those who haven't seen the TED Talk, I'm sure they'll want to check that out. The other thing that came to mind around the why behind the behavior is about why does Don Rheem do this line of work. What I've learned in my own journey, Don, in my own self-development, is that our purpose comes from deep within it. It usually is in us. We don't always know what it is. Our passions come at an early age. The first 10 years, there's clues there. Here you are, and when I listen to you talk, you've got this energy and passion about this whole science and developing people. When you take it back, just tell me about your early years and your years in business. How did this all come about? Why did you choose this path? I would suggest to you that this is really your purpose to do something meaningful to the world.
Well, this is our little when as a team at E3 Solutions, my employees, what we're really trying to do and it's going to, maybe it won't sound odd to you, Tom, but we're actually trying to create better parents and better partners. Because what we know is when things are toxic at work, that toxicity goes home. So if we can create a healthier workplace, and look, where do we spend most of our time when we're awake with other adults? It's at work, by far. So if we can create healthier workplaces, we know every single one of those employees goes home, again, as a better partner, as a better spouse, a better father, a better mother. So that is our purpose, and we're doing it through the lens of employee engagement. We know that we believe that the best way to create this, it's really a healing mission to create a healthier environment, to create more health in people. The best way to do that more broadly is to do it through business, because that's how we're organized today. And I've been talking in our call about the why behind human behavior, and I should just get to that real quick. It turns out that we're herd animals. Now, that may not be surprising to most people, but we are hardwired at birth to perform at our best in a group. And this is, but we don't grow up in tight-knit tribes anymore. But again, where do we spend most of our time when we're awake? At work. So work is the new tribe for the 21st century Homo sapien. And what we're trying to do is to create the conditions that the brain expects to find when it's working closely, collaboratively, predictably, safely with trusted others. And that's the point. And when that happens, we're healthier. And the research shows remarkable people live longer in that environment. There is very clear research that in a positive, healthy work environment, people are up to 30% more effective in what they do. Their cognition expands, their ability to lean in and to help others and to care expands and opens up. That is, they become more innovative. They're much more likely to reach out and help another. This is this is going to be the workplace of the future where this takes place. Because in this environment where for our first time in at least America's history, United States history, we have more unfilled jobs than we have unemployed people. And it's a whole different ballgame. And it was just 3 months ago, I think, to let you know how employees are responding to the old style. It was, I think, 3 months ago that the U.S. hit a new labor record, and it was a record in the number of employees quitting. 3.8 million United States employees quit in 1 month. And that wasn't to go on in the unemployment rolls. It was to change jobs. So people are already walking with their feet, and millennials will be the first ones, for sure.
Yeah, that's amazing. Some great statistics there you shared, Don. And I got to tell you that when you were talking about better parents, my mind went on a journey somewhere else, and we could do a whole nother episode on this. I wanted just to put this out there as a teaching moment that I've spent a decade outside of my own business work in mental health. I volunteer on a board in the area of mental health. And I've interviewed some people on my show who have mental health challenges. Many top leaders deal with a mental health wellness issue in their lifetime, but also homeless people or people who are addicted or connected to the concepts of mental health. And in all those stories and interviews I've done, there's been one thread that's come out of those interviews that someone in the early years of the lives of these people who are addicted or have mental health challenges was mistreated by a parent, wasn't loved by a parent, was told they're not good enough. And you're talking to a guy here, if you know my book, The Way of the Quiet Warrior, that was my story. My father was a military man. He was an alcoholic parent. And I was the kind of a neglected, abused kid. I went into leadership, and in my first 10 years, I climbed the ladder, became a CEO, but I started falling down relating to people. It was that point in my life, Don, where I took a journey to find the why behind my own behavior. I made some major shifts. That's to find the purpose of my life, helping other people. So I think I'd like you just to, as we go to wrapping up in a minute or two, talk about that piece of it, the better parents. Is there anything you want to comment about the area of mental health and how that relates to people you see in leadership?
Well, sure. There are two empirically validated scientific theorems that we follow as the basis of all of our work. One is called social baseline theory. And that was developed by Dr. James Cone at the University of Virginia in Charlottesville. And his work essentially is the defining work on Homo sapiens as herd animals, hardwired to be in a group and only perform at their best with others that are considered safe and secure. The other is the field of attachment theory, specifically adult attachment. It turns out we are hardwired at birth to have safe and secure attachments with others. When we don't, we malfunction. The opposite of having safe and secure attachments is to be, if you will, emotionally isolated. And there are standardized tests now to determine levels of emotional isolation. When we are isolated, that is, you can be in the middle of a room of people and still be emotionally isolated. It's not about being with just people around you. It's about being with people that the brain considers safe, secure, have your back, you can rely on. When you don't have those, when you are emotionally isolated, you're literally 10 times more likely to suffer from clinical depression. You won't live as long, you succumb more quickly to illnesses, and the brain can malfunction. And the most severe impact of emotional intelligence is premature death. And this is something we've all seen our whole lives. The couple that's married 45, 50 years, and one of the spouses passes. And what happens sometimes within minutes, certainly hours and days of that, the other spouse passes. This is now been found in medical science. There was an article in the New England Journal of Medicine that defined this. This is about attachment. And when we have safe and secure attachments, we thrive. Not only at home, but our work is the cutting edge work on adult attachment at work. And when we have those safe and secure attachments with coworkers, with leaders, with the culture, with the mission and vision, we actually are going to be healthier and perform better. And so there is definitely a link here, Tom. You're absolutely correct. And now that we know what creates healthy relationships, we need to start implementing. And this is a huge opportunity for CEOs to add this to their leadership legacy, to create these environments where people thrive. And the good news for business is when they're thriving, they're also more productive. The company's more profitable. They stay longer. They get more done. They're more innovative. It's a win-win for everyone. So let's start doing it. And that's what I lay out in my book, Thrive by Design, the neuroscience that drives high-performance cultures. I'd lay it out on how it should be done.
Oh, that's great. Thanks for that, Don. That's a great teaching moment on the show today. And what I want to do now is I want to honor you with a few words. I write these down as you're speaking. They're not scripted, Don. These are leadership words. The first one is leadership. You are a leader. Number 2 is visionary. Wow, when you talked about better parents, that got my heart. Number 3 is authentic. There's authenticity in everything you say, in your passion. And the last one, and there's 2 here, is teacher and wisdom. I put those together, Don. You are teaching the world in a different way using that science. So I want to recommend to the audience that they check out your book. I mean, Don's book, Thrive by Design, his TED Talk, Can Work Save Our Relationships. He's a man that probably you want to have in your boardroom or on a stage talking and sharing his wisdom, maybe even helping your organization stay engaged. Hey, Don, why don't you just give us the last word and anything you want to say, as well as where people can get a hold of your body of work.
Well, thank you, Tom. First, it's a pleasure and honor to be a guest on The Quiet Warrior, and I appreciate the opportunity. Secondly, I just emphasize that being a CEO, being a leader, I think offers an obligation to create the best environment that you can create so your employees can thrive, both for themselves, their families, and for you. And we now have a clear path on how to do that. If folks want to learn more about us and what we do, the company website is the letter E, the number 3 solutions.com, e3solutions.com. They can learn more about the book at donrheem.com. That was a site that Forbes, the publisher, put together. The book is published by Forbes. And they can always reach out to me directly, Don Rheem, at e3solutions.com. I am out on the road speaking. I'm leaving tomorrow to go give a day-long workshop. So I'm out on the road a lot, and I love connecting with CEOs and companies that way. So I look forward to meeting some of your audience in the near future, Tom.
Well, thank you very much, Don. And everybody, that's Don Rheem, R-H-E-E-M. And I encourage you to follow up and check it all out. And everybody, find this show on iTunes or your favorite internet radio channel. Give it a rating. Certainly highly rate this show of Don so we can honor his work and his purpose in life. and continue to find that life that you deserve and desire and live with that passion and purpose. Don, thanks for being here.
No, it's been fun. Thank you.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to The Quiet Warrior Show. Create is a motive-based leadership development firm. www.kreat.ca